Hello, welcome to episode 4 of the OK podcast. Kenny is back once again, and today we're going to be talking about how to be competitive for the upcoming Flesh and Blood events and anything that might be related to that.
We're just gonna talk
Y-
as we
Yeah,
do.
Pretty,
We get together,
pretty,
we talk about
pretty
games.
much. I want to kind of focus on what differentiates a competitive versus casual mindset, but it can also tie into prepping for events and just other, preparing for big tournaments in general. I think a lot of people have some issues with nerves that people might want to like relieve before the event, or might they're worried that it might affect their performance in the event. Hopefully, this sort of talk helps put it more into perspective and give people a idea of how to approach the callings and other future bigger Flesh and Blood and or other card game events.
cool.
Yeah, I think we should kind of go straight into that. But why don't we talk about kind of our experiences with competitive gaming first, like where we are in regards to competition in card games, because we're really talking about card game competitions here.
Yeah, I guess Hank can go first because he has the best credentials out of all of us.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a competitive card game player for quite a long time. So I started playing card games when I was about 9 years old, and I'm 20, nearly 28 now. I've been, oof, I suppose, carded miniature games, I should say, because they're in that same kind of bucket. But I've been national champion for a few different games like World of Warcraft, TCG, Call of Cthulhu, LCG, Star Wars LCG, Star Wars Imperial Assault, and HeroClix as well. I came third at Worlds for Star Wars Imperial Assault. I've been on the Pro Tour for Magic, and I've had multiple money finishes at Grand Prix for Magic as well. So I would say that like I'm fairly competitive as far as games go. Like I generally know what I'm doing.
Oh wow, with a resume like that. So in terms of my experience with competitive events, most of it has been on kind of the sidelines watching other players. So I'm primarily a judge. So for a lot of events, I mostly just watch players and help assist players in playing and running the events that they're playing in. So I don't really have too much experience with the competitive side of things on the prep side, but I do know from experience like the type of mindset that people go in and knowing generally what like judges look out for and how they kind of adjudicate things is usually pretty helpful for a lot of players.
Yeah. I forgot to add, sorry, I realized we're talking about Flesh and Blood in the calling. I also made the top 8 of the first calling in Sydney. Should probably add that in as
Uh-oh.
well.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
that's a little relevant.
Yeah, it
Meanwhile,
seems tangentially relevant.
Yeah.
yeah. Meanwhile, for me, I'm just like, I got first in the skirmish. I played in some army events. But yeah,
You're an
hope
you're an aspiring competitor, so I guess that
yeah.
makes your insight more valuable, right?
Yeah, so hopefully like this discussion is going to help me as much as it's going to help anyone that's listening.
Anybody else that's won a skirmish and needs some help prepping for other
Yeah,
events?
right? Help with my ladder anxiety. I
Yeah.
guess the one other thing I've done, I guess, is hit legend for Hearthstone. I was 252. I peaked at that, I guess, in on the NA servers,
Mm-hmm.
if that means anything.
Is that your is that your life peak as well?
Yeah, right? It was all downhill from there. But I didn't play Hunter during that season. I was playing Control Paladin. I was playing Ramp Druid. None of that.
Face Hunter's so dirty.
My brother played Face Hunter. I did not like that.
What season was this?
It was Naxxramas.
Gotcha. Okay, well, actually, you mentioned earlier that you had ladder anxiety, so actually, I want to start with that. What is ladder anxiety, and how does that change how you approach events?
So to me, ladder anxiety is just like getting anxious before playing a ranked game or something.
Mhm.
Does
Because you
that
might
fit in your
lose and you might lose score, right?
Yeah, like things are on the line and I don't want to lose. Does that fit in your description? In your definition?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
It's mostly about just apprehension about failing and having to claw back to where you started from,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Because a lot of these online games
yeah,
have consistent ladders where losing a game means that you have to play one or two more games to actually and win those games to get back where you started the day from. And I know this from League of Legends and Dota actually, where you play a game, you lose the game, and now you're like 20 points down in elo, and you have to play another like 6 or 7 games to come out positive, and there's your entire day. There's your entire day wasted just to break even. So I feel like ladder anxiety comes from experience with that sort of feeling, where you don't want to spend your entire day just to get back to where you were. Is that kind of what I'm? Is that kind of hitting the nail on the head, or is it
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of off
no, that's
base?
exactly right. I can't explain things, but you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I think that for me, when I think about ladder anxiety, and I would say that ladder anxiety and tournament anxiety are somewhat similar, but somewhat different. Because the
Mhm.
key thing that you've kind of noted there is that there is something on the line in every game you play. Like, as opposed to just the loss of the game itself, you actually lose, rating points or you lose, ladder points, etc.
Mhm.
So every single game you play actually has lasting consequences in that sense. Whereas in a card game, like in real life, you do, I mean, some games, I don't think Flesh and Blood actually has. Does Flesh and Blood have a rating system? I know it has like legend points,
We have
but
XP, but that's only for wins. So I guess
yeah, yeah.
it could tie into that where, oh, you went to this big event that's like a 12 times multiplier, but you're only coming out with like 12 points. I think
I
that might
suppose the
play into
key,
it.
yeah, I suppose
Yeah,
the key there though is that's more of a missing out rather than something being taken away. If you
exactly.
compare, yeah, if you compare it to like the Pro Tours and the old DCI ratings and UDE ratings from ages ago, those ones had multipliers on tournaments, and when you lost multiplied points. So it resulted in huge swings. So sometimes you would have players in um, those games who would literally have their rating and sit on it. They wouldn't actually turn up and play in tournaments out of that
Mhm.
fear of loss. So it's in the sense it's somewhat ladder anxiety there. And I would say that the way it kind of relates to games like Flesh and Blood or any tournament game is that you have people who are casual players, right? They play the game, they enjoy it. They may even play competitive decks, but they just don't play in tournaments. And there's something about entering that tournament space that is just a little bit too much for them. They're quite anxious about it or just not interested in it. And I think that's kind of more tournament anxiety as opposed to ladder anxiety. But the concepts are similar.
Yeah. I will say that if you have lander anxiety when approaching Fab, one thing to keep in mind is that for all these big tournaments, if you lose, you're not starting from zero. You're just starting from where you were when you began the tournament, right? At most, the only thing that you're going to lose is basically a day's worth of time. But if you approach it from the mindset that you're not really losing time by losing, you're just growing from the experience, and you want to find something that you'll learn from every game in this case. But if you approach it from the viewpoint that you're only gaining experience and gaining knowledge for future events, that might help with it a bit.
I 100% agree. It's really about what you value out of the experience, I guess. I suppose if the only thing that you valued out of the experience was the win, and gaining the XP, and therefore you're anxious about wasting time. If a loss feels like a waste of time to you, that I suppose is where that anxiety could kick in because
Mhm.
you're scared about losing and then losing the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So in that sense, you do have a resource that you're losing. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
no, no.
it's
That's
the Kaiba mindset, isn't it? It's where
yeah.
the only thing that matters is the win, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I feel like if I don't make the top 8, then it's kind of like, why did I go at all? Uh, right? I don't feel like I don't feel like it's worth to do it if I don't think I can actually make it.
Mhm. And I've noticed this kind of mindset actually pervades a lot with a lot of college students, mostly because everything is a zero-sum game to them when it comes to card games. Back when I played Magic, I guess not really back when, but a couple years ago when I played Magic, a lot of my friends would have this same kind of mindset where if I'm not coming out or coming up in value, I've basically wasted my time. Which is, I guess it's a important mindset to have when you are kind of uh, minding your money. But when it comes to these card games, treat the entry fee not as a buy-in, but as a kind of a fee for the experience itself. And anything that you win on top of that is just bonus.
yeah. I suppose for the college student, and I'm trying to think back to when I was there, um, that financial cost and the potential, I would almost say the potential for financial gain is a really big incentive for playing in tournaments, right? Especially
Mhm.
if you're someone
Absolutely.
who, if you're not working, like, I obviously have a full-time job now, but when you're not working, the chance to win like $2,000 feels like, oh my goodness, that's so much. And when you don't get there, it's like, oh, I was just, I feel so defeated. But now, as someone who, earns an income, having the money is nice, but it's not the be all and end all of everything.
Mhm.
And most of the time, even when I turn up to a competitive tournament and I have my most competitive mindset on, I'm still turning up for a good time. If I crash and burn, that's fine, and I'll still play it out. But certainly, I guess you could also see that mentality really present in people dropping when you get the classic O2 drop.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Where I can't win in this tournament anymore, might as well drop and find some other thing to do with my time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if that's I'm not saying that there's necessarily a problem with that mindset. If the only reason that you're playing the tournament is for the win and you can't get it anymore, then it makes sense that your optimal play would be to drop, right?
Hmm.
But I guess that kind of mentality is often where that ladder anxiety or that tournament anxiety can come from, because in a sense, it's all or nothing.
Hmm.
So I guess one of the key things about having a very mature competitive mindset is understanding that, winning is important, right? You're going there to try and win. You're doing your best to win the tournament. You're going to make decisions in each and every game that are going to try and give you the best shot of winning rather than necessarily being the most fun play. You'll do the ones that will give you the best shot of winning. Um, but it's not actually the winning at the end of the day that matters. Sometimes you will play the best game possible. You'll make all of the right decisions. You've chosen a good deck to play on the day, but variance happens to everyone, right? Sometimes you just have bad luck. I think what's better in a tournament is being able to look back at the tournament and go, you know what? I actually didn't make any mistakes. Or I played a really good game all day. And, sometimes it's just not your day.
Yeah. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, especially when you're looking back from your day and realizing that you did make some mistakes, is not to beat yourself up too hard about it. Because the thing is with like these big tournaments and stuff, all of these tournaments are designed to not only tax your ability, your raw skill, but also tax your endurance. Like right, there's like at least 7 rounds per day for the calling, and in these sort of games, right, you're basically firing on all brain cells. You're using 100% of your brain to kind of figure out what the best play is, when what to do in this situation. If you look back and say, "There's a mistake I made. This sucks. I shouldn't have made the mistake." Don't beat yourself up about it, but treat it as a learning experience. Because the main
Mm-hmm.
thing you don't want to do is come back home salty.
Yeah, absolutely. I know one of my good friends, um, who's played games for a very long time. His salt meter is just off the charts. So even in casual games, he'll get really annoyed about things, and I just don't think it's a very effective way to, I guess, to approach gaming,
Mm.
because you're just going to end up really frustrated and really angry all the time, and that's just going to impact how well you play as well.
Yeah. The more frustrated you get, the more often that you'll make bad mistakes because you're going for the quickest gratification to relieve your salt rather than thinking your playthrough and taking your time and maybe making a play that might have better odds but wins less quickly.
This
Hmm.
this all sounds like a therapy session for me. So
It is a
continue.
therapy session.
Kind
Look,
of is,
gamers
yeah.
need some therapy sometimes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah,
absolutely.
like in reality, I guess if you look back and you see a mistake, as you were saying, Yichin, you really shouldn't beat yourself up. It will happen, right? And no one's immune to it. I'm certain that there are some times where I make an error in a game. Like I was playing a game of Great Western Trail the other day, and at the very end of the game, I thought I had a card left in my deck, which I didn't. So that was just like an unforced error. And it did cost me the game. I think it either cost me the game or cost me equal first place. And instead I came last. So I was kind of like, I made an error. But that's okay. Like, it's something that I noted, I've accepted it and moved on. And sometimes you learn from it, right? Like, I learned to count my cards better, basically.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing. When, as part of my day job, I often, meet with people and talk with them about practices that they're engaging in. And sometimes they're engaging in practice that's not effective. But I never try and guilt them into thinking back and acknowledging all the mistakes that they've made. The key thing is just acknowledging that there was the presence of a mistake and then moving on, right? It's acknowledging that there is room to improve. That's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, focus not
Like,
on what you could have done in the past, but more like what you can do in the future.
yeah, exactly. It's all about, preparing for the next game, right? There's no point dwelling on a mistake in the past because you can't change that outcome, right? If you think back to a tournament, you're like, oh, if only I'd done this. That's not actually helpful thinking because you didn't do that. So you can think about it and go, next time, if I'm in that situation, I'll do something different. But that's about the limits of the effectiveness of that, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes down to just making sure that, or a lot of how to prevent this sort of thing. It's just making sure that you kind of are prepared for the tournament mentally. So not basically adjusting your sleep schedule so that you're well rested for the day. Sometimes you might want to adjust your diet just because you want to have more energy, right? If you're eating junk food and all that, it's not necessarily the greatest for your mental uh, acuity. I guess that's the term, mental acuity. You want to have fruits, and want to have a lifestyle leading up to the tournament that will get you the best results and put you in peak performance.
Yeah, it sounds silly because we're in a sense we're talking about card games, but really these should be approached in the same way as sports are, right? Ultimately, like being fit, being healthy, having a great diet. And I'm saying these things. I am not fit. I'm not healthy. So I'm a massive hypocrite on these kind of things. But it is true that based on the science, being fit, being healthy, that those are things that make our brain work more effectively. So, I mean, if you really want a competitive edge, diet and exercise.
Yeah.
That's outside of knowing the game, of course. I guess
It's the other step that you take out once you've mastered the game to kind of get an edge up on your opponents, right?
yeah. What I would say is definitely try and go for slow burn energy throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
So like as an example, my favorite go-to food is bananas. So I think having like bananas early in the morning can be really effective for that. I'm not a dietitian, so don't take my word for it. But for me, it works. I feel like it gives me it's kind of like it feels substantial enough in the morning to feel like I've had breakfast and get me going. But it's also got enough natural sugars in it that it keeps me pumped throughout the day. And just stay hydrated too. You'd be surprised how much hydration really plays a role in everything.
Absolutely. And yeah, if a big thing to keep in mind is that at the venue for Las Vegas and for I assume other convention centers, the food that they serve there isn't actually the greatest. It's mostly just like random food that they picked up from a supermarket, like discount aisle, and just stuck it on there for like twice the price. So if you can bring your own food and try to bring stuff that you're used to, but stuff that will get you through the day that you know for sure. Like cut down on the Red Bulls, grab some fruits, grab some like granola bars, stuff that will
Yeah, I was
actually
gonna say muesli
nutrients.
bars are so good.
Oh yeah, those are delicious.
Yeah, they're super tasty too. It's like you're eating junk food, but also fats and proteins and stuff.
Yeah. I will say though, if you do plan on scrubbing out, Las Vegas has a lot of nice food that is about half an hour away. So if you are planning on the O2 drop, don't feel bad and don't feel limited to just the granola bar diet. There's plenty of buffets.
So you got it, Oliver. You got to hit the gym, stay hydrated, bring
Yep.
muesli bars.
Lawyer up,
Yeah.
delete
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yes, of course, all
Yep.
that stuff, and then you can start playing Fab.
I see. Okay. All right. Got it. Yeah. I was gonna ask you guys like, what can I do outside of the game? But I guess you guys already all answered that.
Yeah.
I suppose we'll talk about what you could do inside of the game as
Yeah.
well. 'Cause we have-
So yeah, let's actually talk about a little bit about like competitive REL or professional REL etiquette. I think that would be pretty important.
Would you like to define REL?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So REL is just rules enforcement level. So in most tier 1 events, that's armory events, magic equivalent, that would be FNMs and stuff. You're at a casual rules enforcement level where it's just a casual game. Nobody's really being a rules lawyer. So you're not really expected to follow the rules to a T. At professional level events, you absolutely are. And so there are some minor things that you'll need to kind of be aware of and kind of keep track of that I've seen players develop as a bad habit that you probably should lose just in case it becomes relevant.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this because I totally get where you're coming from, where sometimes really, really minor things can catch you out. As an example, just an anecdote from when I was at the Pro Tour, there was a player I was watching. I won't name the players because one of them is actually quite a famous player from quite a while ago, but I don't want to cast any aspersions on their character. Although I actually think they're banned, so maybe the aspersions are already there. But anyway, basically one of the key things was this player had no outs. He was dead on the board, right? It was very clear to everyone watching the game that there was no way he could get out of it. However, what he did was he caught his opponent out on effectively a shortcut. Right? It was quite skillful the way he did it, admittedly, but all that had happened was the opponent tried to take a shortcut that he shouldn't have, and that actually ended in the game being a draw rather than as a loss for him, purely because he called him out on a shortcut.
Yeah.
So it really can make a large difference in your game. There are things that are called acceptable shortcuts and other things that are unacceptable shortcuts as well. Now, I know a lot of the ones for Magic, and I'm sure that Yichin knows more than I do, but I'd be curious to know the ones that you've noticed for Fab.
So I wouldn't say they're acceptable shortcut or they're unacceptable shortcuts, but it's stuff like this that might play a role that you probably shouldn't do. Main thing is pitching before you play. So
Mhm.
it's not going to get you a instant game loss, but if you do it often enough, and if you make some mistakes while doing it, say for example, my classic mistake of pitching a card to play a zero cost card because I was planning on playing a somewhat other cost card later, that sort of stuff can get you a warning and can possibly lead to, if you've built up enough warnings, if you make a mistake later, that might result in a game loss. So basically, just be very careful about like following all the instructions to a T. Another one, especially since Levia is an actual like playable character, is that uh,
Debatable.
yeah, I know, right? Uh, when you're playing like non-attack actions and when you're activating your equipment abilities, to make sure that you instantly put them in your graveyard, because if you do a random banish and banish 3 without doing that first, then that's a very clear game rule violation, right?
Yeah, that's a really good example because that is the kind of thing that I'm guilty of sometimes as well. Now I don't happen to play Livia,
Yeah,
but it is very true, right? That when you play a non-attack action, they resolve and then immediately leave the chain.
exactly. Most people are used to leaving them on the chain because it's helpful as a reminder. But when you're kind of playing in these competitive events, you don't want to give your opponent an advantage that they shouldn't have, and might as well just prevent a judge call where, if even if I'm a judge presiding, I'd probably just let you off with a warning. But you might want to just make sure that don't give your opponent opportunity to do so, because that might throw you off your game mentally.
Yeah, that's the key thing. It's the probably the most, I guess, controversial area of a lot of, I would say, Magic tournaments, but also high-level card games generally is the judge call, right?
Mhm.
So judges, generally speaking, are not the bad guys, right? They're just there to enforce the rules, but they're also supposed to be impartial,
Mhm.
right? So even if there is, clear you didn't mean to do something, the fact is that you've violated a rule, so they do have to give you a warning. Of course, like intention does matter. Sometimes if it appears that you're trying to cheat, maybe you don't want this specific card banished, or maybe you want another specific card banished,
Mhm.
then it can that intent can really influence a judge's decision.
Exactly.
But I guess the key thing there is that although judges are not the bad guys in the situation, having a judge call on you is quite a rattling experience,
Mhm.
especially when it's not for something minor. But I guess the implication that you've affected the game state and now it's irreparable.
Yeah, yeah. Like to back
That,
up, or now you have to enforce a penalty, right? There's the intelligence penalty. I think that's what Fab has.
hmm. See, I'm kind of glad in the sense, although even though it's inorganic, I'm kind of glad that Fab has some slight like in-game penalties that can try and make up for the fact that the game state is irreparable.
Hmm.
Because I do recall ages ago in Magic, the worst thing you could hear is you've caused an irreparable game state
Yeah.
because that's an instant loss,
Hmm.
right? So you never wanted to be in that. And sometimes it could be something so like innocuous. It's not even like you're trying to cheat. It's just something has happened that yeah has created an irreparable game state. As an example, it could just be the case that you thought you had one more mana than you did on the previous turn, and then because of that you looked at your opponent's hand when you shouldn't have, and then that influenced your decisions, and then all of a sudden that's completely irreparable because you can't
Exactly.
forget what's in your opponent's hand.
Or to use a Fab example, anything involving a incorrect reprise trigger or an incorrect phantasmaclasm trigger, that is pretty irreparable.
Yeah.
Main thing is that
So
in those cases, you're gaining a lot of information that you shouldn't have, which is looking at your opponent's hand. So even if you back up to a previous game state, you're playing with more knowledge than you should have, and that's something that you
yeah.
can't really take away.
Yes, exactly. Now it is. I guess there's two key things, right? Because there's irreparable game states to your advantage or to your disadvantage. And now, generally speaking, if you do something that's to your detriment, you won't really get judge called on it. An
Yeah,
example might be say that your opponent has a dominate attack coming at you, and you block with 3 cards, and they're all face up, and your opponent goes, well, you can only actually block with one of them.
Mhm.
Now, technically, the game state is irreparable because you've just revealed two cards in your hand to your opponent. But you're never going to get judge called for that because it's instantly repairable and to your detriment. But if, for example, you'd played a card like Phantasmaclasm and you looked at your opponent's hand and got rid of a card, and then they drew a new card, and then you went, "Oh crap! I actually couldn't have afforded that."
Yeah,
That's
that's rough.
that's an entirely different story.
So I'll note that since we're in the discussion about judge calls, is that if this sort of thing happens to you, the main thing to do is just to not panic, because this sort of mistake is what often leads players to make further mistakes down the line, because now they're nervous and second guessing themselves and making sure that every T is crossed and like super laser focused on not making the same mistake, that you might make some other mistake, or you might get
Hmm.
even saltier because you ended up losing the game when you shouldn't have. So when this sort of stuff happens, and for a lot of players it's inevitable, because again, it's a whole day long tournament. Your brain's gonna be fried by the end of it. You're gonna be tired. You're gonna make mistakes sometimes. When that happens to you, just keep with the mindset that it was a learning opportunity, and it's a mistake that was maybe not entirely unpreventable, but it's something that you couldn't have controlled because it was out of your conscious mind's hands, essentially.
Yeah, just be more aware of it in the future. Like, don't take a judge call going on you as like, don't even take it necessarily as the opponent being mean to you.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes like they actually have to do it.
Mhm.
There are a couple of
Exactly.
times where like you do feel bad, right? Because you know that sometimes judge calls don't go well for the opponent, or they might rattle someone or something like that. And it's true that sometimes there are certainly players that do weaponize judge calls.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that you're aware of that, Yichin.
Yeah, a little
Um,
bit.
but the reality is that most of the time when someone's calling a judge, it's actually just because of the rules enforcement level and the necessity of it.
Mhm.
So do your best to remain calm during it. Just talk about what happened and the mistake that's made. The best thing you can do is be honest and just
Yeah.
not worry about the outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the better grinders that I used to judge for in the San Diego area would approach kind of judge calls relatively calmly. But I feel like a lot of newer players who might not be used to having a judge call on them might take it as a sign as, oh no, what did I do wrong? This is the end
Yes.
of the world.
Yeah, exactly. When it's really not. So just if a judge gets called on you, remain calm.
Mhm.
All will be well.
Yeah. And conversely, don't be afraid to call judges on others. For the most part, they should understand, because it's competitive rules enforcement level. If you make a mistake, you have to call your opponent out on it. Otherwise, you might be contributing to that incorrect game state that might lead to penalties to both of you.
Yeah.
So one famous interaction, this is with Magic, is that if you miss a Dark Confident trigger, it used to be that it was a mistake on the opponent's part and it was treated as a beneficial trigger. But obviously, it's not always beneficial because you lose life in that trigger. So it might be beneficial to you to not lose life at that moment.
I know this example.
Yeah. So they changed this a while ago from a beneficial to not, or a detrimental trigger to a beneficial trigger. In these situations, whenever you have a kind of mix up or a mistrigger where something affects the game state, and it might be in both players, kind of advantage to leave it unnoticed, you might be both penalized for that.
Yes. Yeah, you can't intentionally not allow something in the game state to happen. So if you notice something, like as an example, I'm just trying to think of one in Fab that might be the case. Okay, so here's an example. Let's say that you had remorseless on you. So whenever you play an action this turn, you lose a life, right?
Mhm.
Your opponent plays a scar for a scar. Now, if you actually remind them of the trigger, their scar for scar will go again. And so you choose not to remind them. That is directly in violation of the rules. You have to
Yeah,
remind them of the trigger. So even though it appears to be to their benefit, theoretically, because they're not losing a life, the reality of it is that they have a trigger on them, which if you were playing entirely by the rules of the game, would trigger. So basically, play by the rules of the game.
exactly. One other good example I just thought of is Beasts Within's ability, where it reveals a card and puts it in your hand, and then you lose one life for it. Sometimes if your a brute is at like 4 life, they might not want to lose it, or they might want to and hope to finish you off that turn. You're not 100% sure, right? And it's not necessarily in your benefit or detriment to that either one happens. But if they miss the trigger, they should still do it. You still have to make sure that they do it, because I believe it's not a May ability.
That's right. Yeah, it's like Dark Confident. That's actually probably a very close example of Dark Confident. But yeah, what do you think,
Yeah.
Oliver?
Yeah, are you guys talking about all this stuff? I was thinking I have a question about like life discrepancies. Like, what if what if
Oh
the two
boy.
players have different
Oh.
life, right? How would you resolve that?
Yeah.
Or like
So
some basic
so
arithmetic. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, okay. So this is something that I'm unfortunately used to. This is something I had to do back when green-white megamorph was a thing, and life totals changed about 600 times every game. So in these situations, the first instinct of both players is probably to kind of rewind the game state and resolve, not rewind physically, but like rewind mentally and just be like, okay, I did 2 damage to you here, I did 3 damage to you here. Okay, you were at this life, you're at this life. And so usually the notes that you're taking, which is basically the life total changes, should clue you in on where you guys are. For example, if one guy has 6 life total changes and one guy has 7, well, most likely the guy with 6 life total changes missed one.
Yeah.
So usually, if kind of the players can't resolve the discrepancy themselves, a judge is called, and for the most part, they just do the same thing, where we basically just rewind the game state mentally and just be like, okay, where did this life change happen? Where did this life change happen? Unfortunately, if there is a issue with a irreparable life total, I'm not 100% sure. It's usually left up to the head judge's discretion, because that's actually a pretty big mistake. I'm not sure exactly how Fab handles it. I'll have to double check on this. But for the most part, take good notes. Make sure you're keeping up with your opponent's life total every now and then. Just make sure that you guys are on the same page.
Yeah.
And just record all the life total changes that you have, even if they're small, because those small ones are the ones that you're most likely to miss.
Sounds good. Yeah.
What I would encourage as good practice, especially if you're playing at high levels, and the calling is really one of the highest level events you'll probably play in your Fab career. So you may as well treat it as like this is the pinnacle of Fab competitive play. In those cases, any time there is a change in life, I would clarify what the life total is. So, as an example, say that it's on the first turn, you attack, you're like, oh, scar for 4, they block for 3. Oh, sorry, you play something, attack for 4, they block for 3, just go. So that puts you at 39. And just clarify verbally with the opponent every single time you do that. So, obviously, sometimes there are going to be moments where both of you will slip up in a game. You'll forget to remind one or the other of it. And that's sometimes where it can happen. But the more consistent you are with your routine of just checking the life totals each time, the more likely you are to not have that discrepancy. The other thing you can do, it's a little bit more note taking, and I feel like this is legal. It's just putting a note next to the life total of just what happened. So, for example, say that you got hit by a scar for scar and you took 4. Just write 4, scar, 4 scar, S for S or whatever, right? That way it gives you quite a clear record of where the damage came from. So if you need to trace it back, you don't have to replay the whole turn, but you can actually just look at your notes and go, all right, well, you took 4 from scar for scar, you took 2 from, red in the ledger, you lost 1 from something, you gained 3 from sigil of solace. So having that little record can really help with that.
Yeah. So you would recommend paper and pen and not use your phones as the life tracker, right?
Well, in professional level events, actually, you're not allowed to use electronics.
Oh,
So
okay.
you're actually forced to use paper and pen for that.
Cool.
So yes, I would recommend that.
Yes, absolutely. Just so our viewers are aware, usually this sort of life total discrepancy falls under the failure to maintain game state. So for the most part, it's just we'll see what we can do to fix it. If not, then we'll go with the most likely. What the head judge will probably do is just go with the most likely life total that they can find evidence of, and roll with that. Oh, and for those of you who aren't used to competing in these professional events, do note that any sort of judge call is usually involved with more than like a couple minutes. They'll give you a time extension, so don't worry if judge calls take too long, because you'll still be given time at the end of the round to kind of finish your match in the same amount of time that other players have.
Yes, that is true.
And one other thing I just wanted to touch up on, which is actually pretty important for a lot of players, is slow play. Especially for Fab, which requires a lot of minute decisions and lots of thinking. Slow play
So
is
many
probably going to
decision
be,
points.
Yeah, it's probably going to be the most likely called judge call that we'll see during the calling, just because a lot of people will be there with not intimate familiarity with their deck. And for those of you who like to think it's totally okay to do that, but you should be aware that if it seems like to a judge that you're not making moves on time, they'll remind you gently, or maybe not so gently, to make a decision or to play faster.
Depending on the judge.
Yeah, depending on the judge. They'll remind you to play
Yichin
faster.
pulls out the whip. It's like, hurry, faster.
I just take out my clock with a very visible ticking sound, and I just look at it, right?
A visible ticking sound, huh?
Yeah, very audible ticking sound.
Okay.
But yeah, if you get called for slow play, or if you feel like you're slow playing, try to make decisions faster, which is, I guess, isn't great advice, but also don't feel pressured to. Don't feel like that the judge is kind of trying to call you out for it. They just want to make sure that the round ends on time. And since in Fab a draw is a loss for both players, you guys are also incentivized to play at a reasonable pace. I know Oliver has complained about slow players in the past, so I feel like it's important to mention.
Yeah, I play a very slow deck, so I play extremely fast to make up for the opponent's thinking. And sometimes I just barely get under time.
If you're playing Cavdaean, maybe make sure that you know how to play your deck before you actually actually run to the event with it.
Cavdaean and CC, all right.
Yeah, it's possible, right?
Yeah.
You can play it. I'm sure whoever plays it would just be memeing and just be there to add another knock on the meta chart once everything's done. But
Population report, Cavdaean 1.
Yeah, Cavdaean 1. Top 32, Cavdaean 0. Okay, we know how that ended. But yeah, so with slow play and with a lot of other kind of not necessarily play errors, but tournament errors, if you make these sorts of mistakes, just be aware of them. But don't feel like it's not really a knock against your character, and don't feel like that your opponent's trying to single you out for slow play. But mostly it's just, I want to make sure this match finishes on time, and make sure you know your deck before you go into a tournament with it. And that's good on strategic level too, of course.
Yeah, there's this one guy that I was playing against in a skirmish. I said, "Hey, we only have this many minutes left," and he was like, "Don't rush me." I was like, "Oh, okay." It was an online event, so I was like, "Oh, I can't really call a judge, right?" So
yeah, unfortunately with these online events, you can't really call judges for them. But in events where you actually have judges on hand, you can better enforce that.
Yeah. So
yeah, probably the hardest thing, like the most awkward thing about events, honestly, and the hardest thing to deal with when it comes up is the social aspects of it. Right? Like, honestly, in an example like that, where, Oliver, you clearly felt like your opponent was playing slower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're totally within your rights to call them out on that. But then it just gets a bit awkward when they get defensive about it as well. But what I would say is just, if you're ever uncomfortable, if you're ever unsure about something, just call a judge. Don't let your opponent's reactions to how you do things color how you do things.
Exactly.
So, for example,
sometimes
you
just gotta feel like a dick, right?
Yeah, it's just going to happen, right? You might feel like a dick about it, but there are players who will use that to their advantage. They will get sulky and they will make a fuss about things in order to try and prevent bad outcomes to themselves. So just remember that you're not a bad person for calling a judge. If you're unsure about something at any time, call a judge. That is what they are there for.
Yeah. And a lot of judges actually have this issue too, where they're reluctant to call in slow play, because a lot of it is just some people are just slower at making decisions than others, right? Some people just like to evaluate every decision that they have, which is totally fine. And it does make judges kind of apprehensive about wanting to call out slow play. So, which is why slow play is not necessarily a actual penalty unless you get called out multiple times on it.
Yeah, unless it's a pattern, basically.
Yeah, it's basically, please play faster, and if you get slower during the end, we'll take into account the board state, because we'll actually be looking at the board states and be like, okay, I guess you need to go into the tank for this decision because it actually matters. But be aware that we are taking this into account, so we are kind of evaluating whether or not you're playing slow with everything that's happening in the game. I notice a lot of people get defensive because they think, oh, this turn I might die, so I need to think a lot about this. and so they'll kind of retort to the judges that, hey, this is a critical decision for me. You're not being fair. But for the most part, just be aware that we are taking that into account. And to judges listening, I guess, make sure you take that into account.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Yeah, this is pretty helpful in my opinion because I haven't actually participated in any kind of high level events like this.
Well, now you're ready.
We'll see. We'll see in like.
So hit the gym. That's clearly step one is what we made
Of
clear.
course. Hit the gym, eat your veggies. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. Bedtime's at 10 or whatever. Get a good hotel, not just because you need to contribute to the local economy, but because you need to get a good night's sleep. And I guess the other thing to pay attention to is that when you go to the venue on the day of the tournament, try to go there a little early so you're not really rushed into your first match. That way you have plenty of time to kind of readjust yourself and realign yourself with the rest of the event so that you're calm and ready for the first round.
Calm. Right. Still nervous, but yeah.
As long as you're not against like somebody like Jacob Pearson or something in the first round, I think you should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I played him in round 2 in one event and I got wrecked. Brought him down to 3, but I still got wrecked.
Yeah. Well, sometimes again in those cases, it's not really. It's just luck of the draw that you get a really good opponent.
Yeah.
And the way Fat Breakers work is that your first round loss is weighted more heavily against you than your last round loss. So in that sort of situation where you do lose against your first round opponent, it's important not to like kind of lose all hope and be like, oh, my breakers are bad. I have to go XO for the rest of the day. Otherwise, I just lose. Just again, approach it with the mindset that, hey, even if you might not place, you might get close and you might just do your best that you can.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Okay. Anything else you want to cover, Kenny?
On the competitive talk?
Yeah.
I suppose, I mean, nothing that people already wouldn't know. Like, just understand the meta, like, know what decks are good. That's just going to help you get into that competitive mindset and have a competitive edge. But I suppose that's different from the mindset itself. That's more like how to actually win a tournament as opposed to the competitive mindset. So, no, not particularly. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff, and just a lot of the stuff we've covered really is just more just how to deal with a competitive level event.
Yeah, I think so.
We
haven't really talked about what makes a competitive mindset.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I think it's still an important topic to cover overall. But I suppose we'll just kind of clarify that in the title.
Oh, and I guess we'll cover some of the other kind of gameplay infractions too, just to make sure everybody's aware. So other than gameplay infractions, we have also tournament errors, which are kind of outside of the game, things that you might do that might affect the game or that might result in a penalty for you. And for the most part, it's just don't be a dick, right? It's just don't punch people, don't attack people, don't don't berate people.
Be a reasonable person.
Be a reasonable person. The opponent you're facing is probably a nice person, at least to some people. So might as well just be nice to them, and they'll be nice to you. A couple of them I think might be important. One thing is a communication policy violation, and this is for players that try not to talk too much or tend not to talk too much during the gameplay because they're lost in thought. It's important to make sure that your opponent knows where the game state is and what you're doing at all times. So if you're the type to just play cards without really announcing them and just make your opponent read the card, make sure that your opponent actually knows what's going on before you move on to your next action. So for example, an easy one is just going, say, I don't know, come to fight into some other attack, right? You actually want to say, I'm playing come to fight, pitching this card, attacking using the remaining resources so that your opponent knows where the game state is. Because if your opponent isn't operating on that and has represented a different game state than you, that's a communication policy violation because someone somewhere didn't communicate that there was a change in game state.
Just be crystal clear. Like, just communicate clearly what you're doing. As Yichin said, just say, I'm playing come to fight, pitching, blah. Is that okay? Wait for them to say, yep, resolve it, and move on to your next deck. Sometimes, again, it's all about, some people will just take shortcuts which might be accepted at other levels, but it could be really, really, I guess, intricate interactions that happen sometimes that you just need to be aware of. That sometimes will come up at a very competitive level that won't come up at those earlier levels. So just make sure you're taking your time, clearly communicating each step of your turn. and making sure your opponent is in check with you as well.
Exactly, and making sure that your opponent can actually read the cards that they're presenting. For example, if you have like cloudy sleeves or something, or if you have like a, I don't know, if you have a medium played card or something, make sure that your opponent knows what you're playing, just in case that they mistake it for something else. Because if they mistake it for something else, then here we go again. There's another communication policy violation with possibly marked cards. Who knows?
Yeah. Honestly, I think like announcing all your stuff properly also helps speed up the game, so the opponent also doesn't have to like recalculate how many resources you have floating, or
Yeah,
doesn't have to
exactly.
read the card again, reread. Yeah, as you were saying.
Mhm.
So.
You don't have to ask cards in hand when you clearly show them.
Yep.
Yeah. One other thing I think I failed to mention that I think a lot of people get nervous on is deck checks. And if you're a newer player, you might be worried about like, hey, if they deck check me and they find out that I made a mistake, or if they find out my sleeves are somehow marked because one of them is scuffed, that's kind of important, mostly because it's another point where you can't really control it going in, if you don't want to spend money on new sleeves or anything. And if you do get called out for it, it is a pretty severe penalty. So if you do get deck checked by a judge, one important thing to keep in mind is that one, don't panic. We're basically just counting the cards in your deck and making sure that they match the deck list you submitted, and also making sure that there's no obvious marked information on your card. So if there's a couple scratches here and there, as long as there's no discernible pattern to them, as long as I can't, from a completely like stacked deck, I can't grab a card from the deck and have that and know what the card is based off of the sleeve, then you're in clear. So if you do have that sort of tendency where you might, make a double sleeve a card that you shouldn't, and you don't double sleeve anything, make sure that all your cards are double sleeved and make sure that they're all the same thickness. But other than that, just don't panic when it comes to deck checks. I don't know, Kenny, have you been deck checked before?
A million times.
And most of the time,
It happens, right?
yeah,
But
it
like yeah,
happens.
like I'd say like 90% of the time, like I've had some infractions, right? It
Mhm.
happens to everyone, right? And as I'm saying that, like I had infractions even after I was a competitive player for many years. So sometimes things happen, right? It's part of it. Just accept it, move on. If you're really worried about the sleeves thing, you can buy new sleeves before the day, but I wouldn't be too worried about it. Really, I would say the most common infractions happen in sealed, specifically where you've just misregistered a card. That's the most common thing, more so than in constructed. Or if you've written, one of the key things is if you've written your deck list the night before, but you actually make changes the morning of the tournament.
Yeah.
That's another place that you can get tripped up a lot. So generally speaking, what I personally like to do is actually write my deck list the morning of the tournament. But that can kind of set your nerves up if you're running late. So there's a bit of a
Mhm.
catch-22. So if you get there early enough, I just kind of like to calm myself, write my deck list. It also helps me review my deck and remember what's in it. So it just kind of, makes me more in tune with what I'm actually playing with. So that works for me. But if you're certain that you're not going to make any changes, I would absolutely recommend printing out your deck lists beforehand or writing it out, either or.
Yeah. And obviously, if you have questions about like whether or not the deck is acceptable and if there's no issues, you can just ask a judge for a free deck check when they're free. And most of the time they'll oblige unless they're like running crazy, running all over the place. It's just kind of a courtesy thing that judges do for a lot of tournaments. So feel free to just ask the judge to say like, hey, take a look at my deck. Does everything look good? Will I get called out on anything? And we'll let you know if something seems weird.
Cool.
All right, Oliver, anything else you want to know about
Uh.
professional tournaments or anything related to that?
Let's see. Let's see. Not really. I'm kind of curious, like how the event is going to be set up, like table wise. How is it going to be super crowded, or based on like the armor events that we have gone to? That seems pretty spread out, right? But due to like COVID stuff, what would you expect?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about their COVID precautions because obviously there hasn't been any tournaments since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But from experience doing past CFB events, there will usually be it'll usually be like some sort of convention center hall, and you'll usually have a sectioned off for the main event. And those will usually be just signs that say main event, main event, main event. Usually underneath these signs, you'll see the pairings posted. So at the beginning of every round, there's usually a mad dash for those signs in the middle of the aisle, and then people will see their seating, go to their desk or go to their table, and begin playing. There's usually not too much worry about like because everybody's contained in the same relative area. There's not too much worry about people like wandering off and missing the announcement. They usually do a quick announcement on the intercom whenever a round starts or whenever stuff is posted. So as long as you're not like have headphones in and you're not like just like jamming to yourself in the corner of the convention center after a round, you'll be fine.
Okay. So you're telling me I don't need to wear deodorant?
Do wear deodorant, please.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's not going to be as big as the Magic events, but the Magic events where you had like I don't know, like 5,000 people in a single area. You've probably been to a couple of conventions, so you know how sometimes some of the guys that are not too fragrant kind of stink up the place.
Not too fragrant. It's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes people just forget, right? People just don't realize it, or just people who don't usually wear deodorant just like don't really consider it a thing. But just do be mindful that you are kind of in an area with other people, and it's important for people's opinion of you to be higher than it should be. So wear deodorant.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I have
Okay.
nothing else. So, you guys want
That
to talk
sounds good.
about?
I'm about kind of talked out as
Okay.
well.
Do you guys want to talk about anything you guys been up to personally?
Mm,
Any side projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been working on my own game for about a year and almost a year and a half now. And it's been played. I've been playtesting it a bit recently because I'm working from home at the moment with the school holidays. So I've got a little bit more flexible time throughout the day. So I can, play games during the day and then do some work at night, all that kind of thing. So that's nice.
yeah, for the most part, I've been up to work stuff. I have been working on a couple of things on the side for Fab, mostly a kind of PvE supplement that I've just finished testing the first alpha test. So hopefully it becomes something that I am ready to show to the world in a couple weeks or so.
Nice. I was part of the alpha test.
Yeah, don't say anything, please.
Okay. Yeah, keep it top
Oliver's,
secret.
Oliver's also been part of my playtest as well. He's been the number one fan.
Yeah, I'm a free agent. Use me how you
Yeah.
will, because my schedule's open.
Yeah, just free to play games all day, huh?
Yep, and work. All right.
Alrighty.
Well, I guess
Well, thanks
that
for watching, guys.
concludes. Yeah, that concludes episode 4. Bye.